Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Today we have on Mr. John Bernardo. He's a movie director and he's also an author of multiple books. Mr. Bernardo, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you.
It's our honor. With most interviews, we like to start off from the very beginning. So, where did you grow up?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's fast. I was born in Yonkers, New York. I lived there till about 10 or 12 years old, moved down to South Florida, lived here which is where I am now. However, I did have about 11 years in Southern California where I went to graduate school to learn film and screenwriting. And I worked in the industry for a while and moved back here about 20 years ago. So kind of dating myself, but mostly here in Florida, but New York born and LA worked and learned for a while.
Did you play any sports in high school?
No, I actually whole nother story, not the reason I'm on, but when I was 16, I had cancer in my knee. Had something called osteogenic sarcoma, which has been repaired, and I have I walk around fine. Everything was cured, but it rendered I have kind of a bum knee a little bit, and so I can't really run, and I don't play any sports, and I wasn't very athletic anyway, so it kind of worked out.
Were you very academic in high school?
Not really, because I think, well, I mean, I got B's, but creative, people who are creative are always thinking of, I mean, you guys might know if you're creatives, you just daydream a little too much and you don't really want to study. You want to just do creative things. And so if I was taking only creative courses, I probably would have had all A's, but as it was, B's and C's, some A's, so I'm mostly a B student.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry. At what age did you find out that you were a creative person? You started getting into that field.
Well, I was always like that. I wrote books as a kid. My mom saved them all stories, on loose leaf paper. My third grade teacher called me the mad scientist because I was always writing stuff. And so I've got tons of stories and poems and silly things I did from the time I was first able to read and write, which was at a young age. It's just a matter of harnessing it as I got older and understanding that there was it was a skill that could be refined and that you can actually do something with besides writing a story and sticking it in a drawer, showing it to mom. I started realizing that in high school, and then in college I wrote for my school paper because I like sports, and then I also was writing screenplays for my classes, and then went on to graduate school. So it's just something that's always been there and always been something I enjoy doing.
So where did you go to undergrad?
University of Miami, go
Okay,
Canes, right? The U.
yeah. What did you
Um,
major in?
Film. I actually
Film.
started as a
Okay.
journalism major because I was a writer and I liked sports. And then I took some film courses and realized that this was really, I'd rather write make believe stuff. So I started switching over to motion pictures and learned how to write screenplays. And then got a master's degree at the American Film Institute, AFI in Los Angeles, where I studied screenwriting and got a master's degree as a screenwriter.
Okay.
Were you an avid reader growing up too?
I would say, yeah, not as much now. Books nowadays, 300 something pages. I have adult responsibilities. It's hard to sit and focus for a long time, but I'll pick up a comedy novel here and there. And I read a lot of, as a kid, Dr. Seuss, the rhymes, the patterns, silly stories, teenage books that were funny, a lot of
Mm,
that stuff growing up.
yeah. So when you were in high school, did you know that you wanted to go into film or journalism?
Well, I knew I liked film. I didn't know I was going to like become a film major until I went to college, as I said, and I started taking some film classes and was like, wow, I can like do this. But I always wrote for sports. I was a huge, living in Florida at the time, huge Miami Dolphins fan. That was about the time that Dan Marino, who's now in the Hall of Fame, that's when he was starting and he was like breaking records. And so was really into that. And so I wanted to write sports. So I did work for my local high school paper and covered local football games and things. And then when I went to college, I started doing the same thing until I took film courses and said, you know what, I'd rather write movies and make believe and be like what I, pay $10 to see in the theater than cover a sports game. And I still like both, but I'm really interested. I love watching movies and streaming shows and weaving stories and telling stories. So,
Was your mother supportive of your film major?
oh yeah, they were happy with whatever I wanted to do, especially since again coming off of having had cancer in high school and almost missing my senior year, but being able to graduate on time. They were just happy to see me. To be honest with you, they were happy to see me alive and then able to go do whatever my passions wanted. So they were in full support. They always knew I was creative because they would be the recipient of all my stories as a child growing up.
So you mentioned some smaller projects that you worked on growing up. When was your first big project?
Well, I would say in college we did movies, like we had to do a short film in a semester. So we did a couple of short films. So those were big projects because they took several months, while you're doing other things. Uh, then when I was there, I worked in Hollywood for a while. Um, and I've done a bunch. The book that I wrote that you mentioned, that was a big project. The documentary about $2 bills was a big project. It just depends on the size of the project. Sometimes it takes a week to do something, and then so I like to get engaged in things that take a long time, and you piece it together step by step. So it's
Hmm.
a hard question. I mean, there was always maybe a short story I was writing or a short script that took 3 weeks. And then there were bigger, I wrote feature screenplays when I was out in Hollywood, and those took 3, 4, 5 months. So hard to say, but there's always something I'm trying to do. I hate just going to work and coming home watching TV. I always want to be working on something creative so I can get something else out there.
Yeah. So you mentioned the $2 bill documentary and book.
Yeah,
When did
yeah.
you decide that you wanted to start working on that?
Well, I had done 2 short documentary films on my own on topics around here that I thought were interesting, and I wanted to do something with. So there's a project. And then I have these 11 $2 bills. Actually, they're back here in this drawer, still here. This is an old checkbook box, and these are my original $2 bills, untouched. I mean, I spend $2 bills now, but I don't spend these because these are the sacred ones. And I saw them, and I kept looking at them and touching them, and they were cool. And I was like, I got to do something with these. So I decided, let's make a little film. And I thought it was going to be 30 minutes of just a hidden camera, going into 7-Eleven, some history. And then as I started researching it, oh boy, I mean, there was so much stuff. I mean, if you guys saw the film, $2 bills have been on the moon. There's superstitions about them. The woman who lost her husband in the World Trade Center on 9/11. It's just endless stories and things I learned researching it. People calling me saying I'm the guy that was responsible for this and that. And I ended up doing like 70 interviews, and I had so much great content. It was hard to fit into a 100-minute movie, and I did. And then I had so much extra stuff that I started doing little vignettes and making a YouTube channel out of it. And now I have 24,000 subscribers on a YouTube channel. So it's, people love it. It's hard to explain, but I found so many people that are in love with this bill and use them and get so much joy out of the interactions that they get when they spend them. And so it's really been an amazing experience from what I thought was going to be a silly little project with using those bills in my desk drawer to really a feature film that won some awards and now is a great YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So if we can circle back just a little bit, what type of feature films did you create in college?
Well, I didn't create any features. I wrote some
I wrote features,
scripts.
wrote features.
They were comedies, mostly comedies, because that's the kind of, my book is a comedy, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But I always wanted to be, funny and quirky, and so I wrote a lot of screenplays. I wrote one that almost sold. It was about a guy that opens a revenge for hire business, and
Mm.
went through it. It got me an agent, got me a manager. All the studios had it. We thought they were going to make an offer. It just fizzled out. And then a couple of years later, a movie came out called Dirty Work. You ever heard of it?
Yeah,
Mhm.
With
I
the
love them.
Bob Saget directed it. Norm Macdonald was in it. When that came out about 3 years after my script was out, my dad and I, we thought somebody might have stolen it. My movie was a little less sophomoric than that one. That was kind of just really silly and stupid, but amateurish. But it's the same idea. And so I wondered when my idea was circulating around Hollywood, which it was, whether someone heard it and then just, processed it, forgot about it, and then went, "Oh, I got an idea. Let's do about a guy that opens a revenge for hire business," and
Mhm.
went off and made one. So I know my idea was good enough. That film kind of stunk, in my opinion, but at least, I mean, it was a little upsetting, but it was also like, okay, my idea was good enough, albeit with somebody else. But I wrote a lot of features, and then you just try to shop them around, try to catch a break like every other writer. You try to get somebody to bite on it and be interested in it. And, I still do it. I'm working on something else now. And, you hope that somebody sees it, takes an interest, and makes a movie out of it and starts your career, no matter how old you are.
Did you have a professor in college that really affected your time?
Yeah, I had 2 people. One of them was George Capewell. I believe he's passed away. He was a film teacher who we made our films under. And then there was a gentleman called Paul Nagel, who I know has passed away, who was a screenwriting teacher and had written in Hollywood for a while. And he
Mm.
really showed me how a screenplay should be written and, things that you put in it and formats and how to tell a story visually. And that really helped me a lot. So I credit those 2 guys for taking what was a journalism major and showing me enough about movies to make me go, wow, this is really fascinating. I want to do this, and switch my major over to motion
Mm.
pictures.
Mm.
And the irony is, I was in journalism and I was writing for the school paper, and if I would have stuck with that, I would have been the editor of the school paper because the senior was leaving and I had the most seniority. But I ended up switching my major, so I didn't do as much for the newspaper. The person underneath me, his name was Dan Labitard. You ever heard of him?
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
Oh, he's got a big following. He was on ESPN for a while. He's got a big popular show, the Dan Labitard Show, and
Okay.
he was there when I was there, and ended up becoming the sports editor when I didn't. And he's got a career now doing what I
Mm.
could have done. He went one way, I went the other, and he
Mhm.
did. He's doing a show. It's on YouTube. And he's got people. He talks about all sorts of Miami sports and national sports. So it's interesting the way that worked out.
Mm. What do you consider your profession to be right now?
I do a lot of video editing. I have my own company, shooting and editing videos. So I have like my own production company. I do have a full-time job as a video editor for a company. That's what pays the bills, and gives me the health benefits. But then on the side, I'm always shooting things, corporate videos. I do a lot of dance shows, recitals, easy money, film a ballet or something. And so I'd say my career right now is videographer slash editor, but I still write because that's kind of my passion, and still hope that somewhere down the road I can catch another break like I did the first time with my script. Even though it didn't sell, it got a lot of exposure, so much
Mhm.
exposure that someone else took it and made another movie out of it. But um, that's the hope, is to keep writing and hope that it you can have a career as a writer.
There's a learning curve I found with content creation. Did you find there to be one as well? And how have you approached it?
You guys are younger than me, so content nowadays means, a minute video on Instagram or something. So when I was younger and your age, there was no any of that stuff. So if you made a movie, you really had no way for anybody to see it unless it was like at a school showcase of student films, or people would come and they watch them. So content, that word didn't really exist. There was really nobody called it content anymore back then. Um, so the learning curve is really just learning how to write better, or how to, if you're shooting something, how to shoot better, how to tell stories visually, like I said. So uh, the learning curve is just I never really thought about it. It's just what you would expect. You expect to be this good at it and then get this better, a little better, and a little better until you think you've mastered it. And then there's some stuff I wrote that I look at even today and go, wow, that's really good. Like, I don't know, how did I do that? 25 years ago, that's really well written. Like, that was well done. That was well done. That might not have been, but that was well done. And so it's repetition and practice, and it's ability. I think I have a modestly an ability to do this, and I'm not like the best at it, obviously, but I think it's in my genes to write and create and be funny. And so you just have to hone that craft like anything else. Play the piano, you want to practice until you get really good. That's the learning curves. Just keep playing.
How important do you find connections with people to be, especially in business?
Well, in Hollywood, it's all about connections, and that's not something, people who are creative. I don't know if you guys are like this, but people who are generally creative almost are not introverts. I wouldn't call myself an introvert because I do have a personality, but you want to just be home working on your stuff. I'm more comfortable writing something at my computer than standing in a crowd of 30 people mingling, trying to get to know people. But you have to make connections to succeed. So what's the question? How important are connections? I mean, they're important, but it's not like high on my list of things to do. It's kind of one of the I think most creatives will tell you the same thing, that they would rather just have somebody else shop the script around, or meet
Mhm.
people. So they're important, but I don't. It's not what I do really. I mean, I'm better at creating than I am at socializing.
Yeah.
So after college, what was the job search like in the move out to California? Was that stressful? Was there a lot of job openings available?
Uh, well, what's funny is I graduated in Miami and didn't really. I can say this now. I didn't really have a plan. It was just like, how when you finish a year of high school, you just kind of go home for the summer. You don't have anything to do because you're just kind of taking 3 months off until you go back. That was like the routine I'd been in. I didn't realize this till later, till I thought about it as an adult. But I graduated college and just was like, okay, it's summer, and didn't really have like as soon as I graduate, I'm going to go do this and that. So I had no plan. I went home and was like, took some time off, and after a while, I realized, what am I doing? I have nothing to do. So then I had spoken to a friend that had moved out to California, and he told me about the school he was at. So I applied to a couple of graduate schools out there, and I got into the American Film Institute. So that following August, I went back to school. So I really did a year of nothing, just doing some video production for my business, which was small at the time, shooting things for people. editing on a VCR, that sort of thing. Then I moved to California, and for 2 years I was in a screenwriting, intense screenwriting course, and you weren't really allowed to have a job.
Mhm.
Then when I got out of that, I had some friends, and somebody hooked me up with a job at America's Funniest Home Videos. I worked for them for a while, back when Bob Saget, who ended up talk about twists of fate. Bob Saget directed the film that was the same idea as mine, called Dirty Work. But I worked for Home Videos for 4 years and worked for a show called World's Scariest Police Chases. I worked for a show on Lifetime, and that's kind of the way it is out there. You just meet people, talk about connections. You meet people, they know you, they move to a new job, they bring people with them that they know and trust. And I never sent a resume out, like, ever, and was continuously employed in various television shows and things like that.
Can you touch more on your time at AFV?
AFI,
What was it
AFV,
like?
yeah.
Mhm.
So I started out as what was called a logger. People used to mail VHS tapes in. You guys know what a
Mhm.
VHS tape
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
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 So people would mail. That's the only way. There was nothing else at the time. People would mail VHS tapes in, and so we'd have this a lot of. It was a popular show. There was bins of mail with tapes. So I was one of like 3 or 4 people that sat in the back, opened up the package, wrote down the sender's name and address, put a number on the tape that corresponded to the number on the sheet, and passed it off. And then the screening department would watch it. Eventually, I got promoted to the screening department, so my job was to take batches of tapes and watch them and put a score on it. So just describe dog jumps through hoop, falls into bushes. And if it was, 2 out of 10, I would give it a 2. If it was a 5 or greater, it would move on to the producers to consider for the air. And eventually I was the one that compiled. I kept moving up the ladder, and eventually was, putting little segments together, 5 or 6 dog clips that they would use. So that was kind of my run there. And it was great to see there was some crazy stuff that got sent in.
I was about to
Um,
ask.
yeah, I mean, there was some wild stuff, and I don't want to. I can't. We used to, something crazy would happen. We'd call it, but come on over here, everybody, come here. And the whole office would like come in and file behind you, and you'd play the clip, and everybody would crack up, and you knew it was going to be a hit on the
Mhm.
show. Yes, it was fun. 4 years of doing that. That was a time when the show was kind of not dying, but Bob Saget wasn't going to come back, and we weren't sure if the show was going to get picked up. So they basically let everybody go for the summer. I think it took like a year before they re-upped it, and I had found something else by then. So when they came back with other hosts, I was no longer with the show. Otherwise, I mean, God, I could still be with them today. I mean, it'd be 20 years, I'd still be with them. Some of the people still work for the show. Some of the higher ups are still there.
Was there ever some tapes that were funny, but there's no way that you could have put it on television?
Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. In fact, one of them I can talk about, because Bob Saget, he didn't work at the office. He shows up on the studio. He came, he was in the office one day, and he comes into the screening room and says, "Hey, you guys got any, the same questions you guys got anything that, No, Bob, they never wanted us to give him anything. But one day there was a clip we called it the Canadian butt smoker. It was a Canadian resident, and he was a big, heavy guy, and literally he was bent over with his butt facing us, and he had a sombrero on his back, and he had eyes painted on his butt cheeks and lips and nose,
Mm.
and a skirt so you couldn't see anything. So it was just this big butt face with a skirt and a hat, and he put a lit cigarette in between his cheeks of his butt, and he had a tube that he was blowing through, so it looked like this butt was smoking. Now he's doing ho 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 ho, and the person who's filming it's cracking up. So this was like, oh my God. And then, of course,
This
what
is
happened was
creative.
the cigarette slowly was losing its grip, and eventually
Oh.
and he jumped up and burned his inside, if you know what I mean. And the tape's cut off. And it was hysterical. We called it the Canadian butt smoker. So one day at like a season-ending party, I had made a copy of it, and I called Bob over and I said, "Bob, here, take this, from the screening room, from the guys in the screening room. Don't, you didn't get this from me." And I gave it to him, and he was so grateful. He was so grateful. I said, I think I was watching him on a show one day, and he referenced it, like he talked about the clip on a talk show or something, and I'm sitting there going, "Yeah, I gave him that clip." I mean, it was, So we had a whole bunch of those that there were people. I don't know why. A, why did they do that? Like, B, why did you send it in? I mean, there was all sorts of no pornographic stuff, but there was feces shots, and there's all sorts of just stuff that you like. Why is this happening? And then why are you sending it to people potentially to put on the air? It was pretty unbelievable. Sometimes clips were funny just because you couldn't understand why somebody would send it in.
Yeah. Mm,
So
yeah.
a lot of that.
The ratio? Do you know the ratio of videos that got accepted to
Not much,
denied?
not high. No, nowadays I would imagine I'm not there, but now that people are taking video with their phones and not a camera, there's probably so much more video out there, and people can just make a submission by uploading it instead of mailing a VHS tape. I think they're probably getting even more submissions than they probably did, and there's probably a greater variety of good stuff because more stuff is caught on camera because more people are
Yeah.
Yeah.
rolling. But back then, you had to have your video camera on and catch something, and that was probably a little harder to come by. So a lot of stuff we got was like baby in a high chair. Mom thinks the baby's really cute, the way they blah 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 blah, blah, and they think that's funny, but there's nothing to it. They think it's cute and funny, but it's not. And so, if you're sitting there going, "Oh my God," you have to like just forward through it, make sure you didn't miss anything because they were supposed to cue it up to the funny part, but you couldn't be sure. So sometimes you'd sit through 45 minutes of a baby in a high chair, just kind of, ready to kill yourself. Um, just in case there was something funny because you knew you couldn't take the tape out until you saw for sure. So anyway,
So what was it like working with Mr. Saget? I've always been a big fan of his
I didn't work
shows
with
and
him.
stand up
Mm.
or interacting with Mr. Saget. Was he a
Yeah,
nice
I mean,
guy?
yeah, he's. I mean, God rest in peace. I can't believe he's gone. I didn't work with him too much because he was never in the office. He would show up on the day of the shoot, and I didn't really have a job on the set, except on occasion I'd stop by there. He was a little bit juvenile, like he would always want to entertain. So he was very nice, but he also would just like a 10-year-old just do, oh, look at this, a fake lobster on the set. Act like he's choking him or something. And I'd just be like, what are you doing, man? You're a grown man. But that's the way he was. He knew who I was. Like if I ever talked to him again and said, hey, I'm the guy that gave you that tape, and I worked, he would remember me. But I didn't really know him. I
Mhm.
didn't hang out with him. Just interactions at work here and there. He was what you saw he was.
Was there any one job that had a big influence on you?
No, you know what influences me is like watching the Academy Awards and seeing people celebrated for their achievements and not getting jealous. I mean, a little bit envious, whatever, and just saying, I wish that were me, and God, I want that to be me. So I'm gonna go work harder, things like that. So certain movies that I love that are well written. You come out of a certain movie, you're inspired. I have a friend it's a big Star Wars fan. He always talks about on Facebook how it changed his life the day he first saw Star Wars, and he's always into gadgets and all those. That's what set his career. So I guess just seeing movies, I grew up on like old Disney movies. Just seeing movies that were really well done and funny inspire me to want to be able to do the same because I believe I can. And so that would be the way I'd answer that question.
When you went out to publish that documentary, were you hoping you would achieve that success?
Well, the irony of the documentary is I figured it was going to be silly and quirky because the $2
Yeah.
bill is silly and quirky. And as
Yeah.
I got all the footage and shot everything, especially, talking to a woman whose husband died in 9/11, I mean, that's not funny. And I realized that there was a real story there, which I think I told really well, but it wasn't my style. Like I wouldn't predict that I would have made a documentary about a piece of currency that
Mhm.
had some fun moments. I mean, there's definitely some lighthearted stuff in addition to the heavy stuff. But so my expectation, I forget your question specifically, but I don't think that it's just a different kind of thing for me. It wasn't the kind of thing I would do that I would think I would do.
Mhm.
So what was your question? I think I lost sight of your question.
Did you expect that type of success?
Oh no, I didn't expect the type of success, not at all, because I didn't realize when I started it that so many people were a fan of the $2 bill, and there's so much that people don't know about the $2 bill. So it was educational, and I have a teacher background. I used to teach in addition to running my business, and so it was nice to make something that educated. And my YouTube content, if you've watched some of it, it is educational and it's also entertaining and it's a little quirky depending on which video you're talking about. But it was just a way for me to cover, yeah, it was a way for me to cover a lot. And I don't mind being serious. It's not my go-to, but it was, when you have a topic that you want to tell a story like that, I was so into telling that story that I found the right tone for each segment and made it work. So, but I didn't expect people to react the way they did, and I never would have thought I'd have 24,000 people, following, on YouTube and watching my videos. So that has been a surprise. But now that I've done it, that's what the $2 bill does. I mean, that's what I know about it from having made this film.
Yeah.
And exactly like you said, some of your YouTube videos are very educational, and some are really funny too.
Yeah.
Like me and Ethan, we were watching a few the other day.
Just scrolling through them and
Which
Really
one? Well,
funny.
give me one. I'm curious now. I'm gonna interview you. Which video did you find like amusing?
it's not exactly appropriate to
We
talk
can,
about on air.
but
Oh,
the
okay.
stripper one,
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's in the movie, but I actually,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
so yeah, they're. Well, I can talk about it here. They're popular at strip clubs, some strip clubs, and there's one particular one in Portland, Oregon, that used only $2 bills, and they dyed them red.
Yeah.
it's cleaner,
Yeah. So
right?
that one was mentioned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I took that out of the. You can watch the film for free on YouTube, but I took that out of the full film because then I would have lost the ability to monetize it with ad
Monetized. Yeah.
revenue.
Okay.
because I
Yeah,
watched
because
it on
I
YouTube.
make pretty
I
good
remember
money on ad
Yeah,
revenue, but I did put
it
the
was
clip
mentioned.
up elsewhere.
It was mentioned in the book, I think, is
yeah,
what.
the book.
Yeah, yeah, okay, right, right.
Yeah. 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 So that's yeah.
And
But I thought it was very interesting
it's
how
a
that
part
worked.
of. I mean, look, listen, my wife wasn't thrilled about it, but it's part of the story. And if you're going to tell a story about a dollar bill and be thorough, you can't leave that stuff out. I mean, that is a significant part of its history, and it's still used that way today. Girls love them because they get twice as much. Guys want to get rid of them, So everything you saw and read about, so that's in the film, and that was an interesting thing about it. But yeah, it is amusing.
Yeah. So the book I view as kind of a companion guide to the film.
Yeah, the
Did
book was
you?
an idea I had after the film was done, and I saw what kind of
Okay.
interest I had, and
Okay.
I'm thinking about the reason why I decided to do that. Oh, I think at the time, iPad books, interactive iPad books although they're not really that way anymore, where you could, turn the page on an iPad and then interact with it, watch a video. And I said, wouldn't it be cool to turn the movie into like kind of an iPad book? And so I started doing that, and then I think that just kind of fizzled out because nobody was really those things didn't take off the way they were. But I still wanted to
Yeah.
write a book, and as an author, it wasn't the kind of book that I write like my other one, my humor
Yeah,
fiction novel. But I had all this great material, and I said there's some things I didn't cover. I got some new stories, and put the book together. And again, I think it's like a good coffee table book. If you've seen the film, there's a lot of repetition. There's a couple of new things, but otherwise, it's the kind of book I would put out. You can put it in the bathroom, and then it'll get your interest. And you'll just pick it up. You could flip to any page and learn something. You don't have to read it cover to cover. It's one of those find the page that interests you and read it, learn something.
and the book is self-published, correct?
Correct. It's on Amazon. I would advise anybody interested not to get the Kindle version, which I have to delete because I think it's the Kindle version, I think formatted improperly. So if you download it, you're going to be really upset because it's sideways, starts on page 42. I got to take it off of there. Actually, I got to remind myself. But the paperback, the beautiful thing about the paperback, it's a little pricey, and I didn't want it to be that expensive, but it's in color. And that's what makes it expensive. And if I'd have known that, I would have. Well, I don't know. I probably still would have done it that way because without color, it just loses a lot. I mean, it's good. It's
Yeah.
a great book
Pretty.
because of the color. So it's like 16.99. I make like 40 cents on every sale. But you could, if anybody wants it, they can buy it directly from my website, which would be about $3 cheaper. So
That's
yeah,
what I
that's
did.
it. That's $2billmovie.com, the number excuse me, $2billmovie.com. Go to the store, buy one, and then I ship you one directly. You probably get it faster, and um, and you get a little handwritten note from me, and it's cheap.
Yeah, and something I
And the
noticed during the checkout
price,
process was the price was $22.22.
Oh, is that what I did?
Was
I
that?
forgot. I forgot.
Yeah, that was done purposely, right?
You mean the total with shipping?
Yeah, with shipping.
Okay, right, because I didn't. It's only 14. Why would it? That's a lot of shipping.
It was
Well,
like
whatever
five
I
was it the
did.
dollars.
DVD and the
Yeah,
book?
I
It
made
was
it.
the DVD and the book.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, right.
So
Okay, I was gonna say that's too
yeah,
expensive for the book. DVD
yeah,
and the book was 22.22, right? So yeah, I
yeah.
did that on purpose. It
I thought
worked
that
out
was pretty
really
cool.
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the process of self-publishing a book?
Um. Well, let's see. That book. Okay, there's two different things I can talk about because I'll skip to my humor fiction novel. You write it all yourself, and you have this body of 300 pages and you've already hired a company to do your cover and you have the cover. I hired somebody else to kind of I didn't really know how to put the pieces together. What do you upload? So I had help. The other one, somebody else designed it. So I wrote the text and I sent them the pictures and they formatted the whole thing for me. So I basically handed off, here's this chapter's and here's 5 pictures. And they sent me a proof. And I said, you know what? I have a picture of a hand with a two up. Put that in here. So we kind of designed it together, and then he did all the work. So I don't know too much about the process of like if you gave me a book right now and said self-publish this, I'd be like, I can learn it. But the other route is to try to find a publisher, and you get rejected a lot. I mean, I've never actually really tried it, but you being anybody, it's hard. You have to send query letters out, send samples, hope to get somebody's interest, hope to get somebody to bite. Could be a
Yeah.
year, and I don't really want to wait a year to publish the book. I just put it up on Amazon, and that's kind of the way. I think the world's headed that way a little bit now. I don't have to pay anybody royalties. People can write a book and publish it, and I think that's beautiful. Well, it's beautiful because if nobody wants to buy it, don't buy it. But it's out there. Like I can, when I was a kid writing books, there was no way for anybody to read it. There was just no way. My son can write a book right now, and even if it's like the scribbles, I mean, he's 16, but if he were 6 and scribbled a book out, I could technically publish it and say scribblings from my 6-year-old and put it on Amazon. And if it had an appeal, it might, somebody might buy it. So I love the process of being able to do that. You have to. The hard part though is there's no marketing engine behind it, so you have to really work to get people to see it. The $2 bill book has a built-in audience because of the film. My other novel, it does pretty well, but I got to constantly do stuff for social media or
Is that one
enroll it.
self-published as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, self-published.
Yeah. Okay.
And I probably could get a publisher. I think it's good enough, but I don't
Yeah.
want to spend the time doing it. Like I wrote it. It's topical. It's about cancel culture. I don't want to wait a year and a half before somebody publishes it. So
Are you a big fan of Brandon Sanderson? I know he's done a big Kickstarter program with his novels, and he's already a big time published author through Tor. But I think he had like the biggest Kickstarter campaign ever with 50 million
wow,
for
what's
his
his?
new
I don't
books.
know who is that. What's his name?
He writes fantasy novels.
What's his name?
Brandon Sanderson.
Brandon Sanderson.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I almost want to look that up while I'm. No, I've never
Yeah.
heard of him. He was a self-published author who just raised money so he could publish his book.
No, but he was actually a author published through Tor, a fantasy publishing company.
Oh,
So he was
previously.
already pretty, yeah. But he had a big Kickstarter program. He wrote a bunch of novels during COVID and didn't tell anybody about it. And had a very large Kickstarter, and they raised tens of millions of dollars with it. And that's how he
Great
financed the book.
idea. That's a great
Yeah.
idea. You got me thinking already. Like if I wrote another novel, because it costs money. I had to pay even though I self-published it, I had to pay an editor to proof it and read it. You can't trust that what you wrote is going to be perfect. I paid for the cover, and then I paid somebody to help me self-publish it. So I mean, it was $4 or $5 to write a book and put it out, which is one
Yeah.
reason why, gee, I want to write another book, but I don't really want to spend $5 grand. I mean, by the time I make that money back. But yeah, I mean, if you did a Kickstarter, now that I have a current novel, I mean, I could make a video. I'm just thinking out loud, make a video because that's what I do. Um, yeah, that's interesting. I have to just look into that.
Yeah. Me and Luke have read part of Just a Typo, and we'd like to ask you about it in a few minutes.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we haven't read it all, but it's really good.
Because we had the final exams this past week, and we
Yeah.
started our college course this summer.
Yeah.
It's been crazy, but in my free time when I'm in town, I've been reading it.
Yeah.
It's really funny. I like to talk about it a little bit later. If we can kind of loop back to your time after AFV to the time you started publishing the $2 bill document or filming the $2 bill documentary, what was that time period like for you? What kind of work did you
All
get?
right, so I lived in LA and I was working on all these TV shows, and the problem with that is there's no full-time, no guaranteed income, or a TV show gets canceled, you're out of work. And so that happened a lot of times where you're making good money and you're working, and then the next week I was doing substitute teaching in between shows because shows would go on hiatus for 6 months while they waited, and I would go teach. So one day I'd be on the America's Funniest Home Video set on a Sunday, and then the next morning and on Monday I'd be in a sixth grade classroom, doing substituting for social studies or something. So I did that for a while, and then eventually my wife and I, we knew we had a future together, and housing in California was too expensive. And my old high school guidance counselor back here in Florida offered me a job if I wanted to move back to just be a high school teacher. And my wife wanted to move. There are lots of family reasons and whatnot. So we moved back here and I taught high school for 3 years. And then I didn't really like teaching high school as much as I wanted to teach film. So I moved to a college next door and taught film and television. In other words, I was working in the industry and then I was teaching screenwriting, video production, video editing. And I was doing that for a while and doing short documentaries, and got the idea to do the $2 bill documentary. That was about 2013. That's 10 years ago. I got the idea. So I was working like anybody else. I was just teaching film and television, running a business, shooting on the side for people, doing corporate stuff, and then would be working on a little documentary or a short story or a script. until the day came where I said, let's go make this feature. And it took me 2 years and 2 weeks to make the $2 bill documentary.
Oh, wow.
And then I was touring the country doing film festivals, and
Mhm.
then it was just literally like on to the next thing. YouTube channels there, make a video to launch this week, write the book, go write your humor fiction novel. It's just always try to do something that satisfies your creative gene and gives you a chance to succeed elsewhere. Maybe who knows if my book were to take off, now I'm a best-selling author. Write a short script, maybe you get a TV show picked. I mean, there's you do it because you enjoy it, but you also hope that somewhere down the road your work is good enough that it attracts people and who give you an opportunity to keep doing it and get paid for it. So, I mean, if I don't know if I answered your question specifically, but it was just go to work, pay the bills, work on things that inspired you and got your creative juices going, and finish that project and move on to another one and try to get that last one out there.
Did you get any comedic inspiration from teaching high school?
Yeah, 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 probably, yeah. It's funny because I think Steve Martin always kept a journal. Like anything he got an idea, he wrote it down. I mean, it's so easy to say I should have done that, but it's hard to, like, in the middle of class, take out a journal. But there's things I remember. If I sit down and think, if I want to do a parody of high school teaching, I mean, I can pull up a whole bunch of things from my experience or make things up based on things I kind of remember or feelings I had. But yeah, there's comedy to be had anywhere. In family life, there's comedy to be had. Any job you have is ripe for comedy. Situations, driving in the car, hearing something on the radio that makes you kind of go like, "What?" And then there's humor there. So I don't write stuff down like I should, but I mean, it sounds silly to say this, but your whole life experience, you take it all in, and then somewhere it filters and then comes back out somewhere, depending on what you're doing. So I just kind of trust that my experiences will. I mean, hospitals. I was in a hospital for a year when I had cancer at age 16. So um, if I want to do something parody of a hospital, I can call on those memories without having written anything down,
Mhm.
knowing what it's like using my experience. So.
Did your high school students think it was cool that you were working in this field?
Well, I
Was
was
the
out of high
subject that you
school. Yeah, I
taught?
mean, I was out of high school, but friends of
I,
mine that I
I
still
mean,
have
when
in.
you taught in high school.
Oh, yeah, I told them I had come from. But it's funny because the first year that I taught, and this is a whole other story. I think I might have told you guys before. I was on the Wheel of Fortune,
Okay.
Really? Oh yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
and
I
Yeah.
remember.
I literally went on the show the day before I moved to Florida, and because I was an approved contestant, and they don't get the local people on right away because they know there's time. They fly people in to be on the show. So I had called them and said, "Listen, I'm moving to Florida. I need to get on the show, otherwise I'm gonna have to fly in to be on the show." So they booked me on a show, and literally we waited like 4 extra days to move to Florida because my show date was before. Anyway, the point is, I went on the show, I won, and then when I got to Florida and started teaching high school, yeah, they knew I was in the industry, but I was like, I was just on Wheel of Fortune, and the show airs in November, and I won $12,000, and I had a countdown on the board. Every day I would race it and put another, like letting the kids know, here's the day I'm on Wheel of Fortune, because I couldn't wait to watch it. So that was like they were all like, oh my God, this guy's not going to stop talking about this. But that was the big thing. The first year was that I was on Wheel of Fortune. And then every year in class, the kids knew I had been on Wheel of Fortune. The next year, they'd say, "Can we see a tape of it?" And I'd be like, "Sure." And I'd take the tape out and put the tape in, and we'd
Mm,
spend one day of English class watching me on Wheel of Fortune.
yeah.
What was the? Were you a big fan of the show beforehand, and did you
That's
practice very much for
Yeah,
Bill
I'm good
Fortune?
with words as a writer, obviously. And my mom's favorite story is that I had chemotherapy when I was in the hospital for cancer, and they had to knock you out for that. And so one time I was in the hospital, I'm asleep, Wheel of Fortune's on. I woke up, looked at the TV, like drowsy, solved the puzzle, and went back to sleep. like like I was like barely conscious, but I woke up and said, "Quick as a cat" or whatever it was, and dozed back off. And so I knew I had to go on the show at some point. And finally, they were always backed up with contestants. They didn't really need contestants. There were so many people in the queue. But after a couple tries, they had an opening, and I went in there and I took the test and audition, and I got on. So great story.
So, somewhat tangentially related, your book, Just a Typo, is about a game show host Did your
Yeah.
experience on Wheel of Fortune influence you to write the
Yeah, I'm
book?
sure. Yeah, and you talk about, I just was talking about how life experiences, you just kind of remember them. That's exactly, being on a game show. I always liked watching game shows. And when I was in the hospital with chemotherapy, you have nothing to do. You didn't have phones back then. So I'd wake up in the morning in the hospital in New York, and, from 8 a.m. to noon were game shows. And then
Mhm.
soap operas were on, and I'd take a nap, and then you had the afternoon and evening. That's all you did was watch television, and you're in the hospital. Um, so yeah, I watched all those game shows, and I'm a big fan of game shows. I absorbed them, and I just think it's, I went on TV and I played a game and made $12,000. I mean, in like 30 minutes. It's just crazy, and then some game shows are stupid, and so I gave the host. I just wanted to explore that world, and I made him a game show host. And then I was able to, because I had this real stupid idea for a game show called Hats Off. I don't know how far you guys got in the book when if he describes the show, but you probably didn't if you didn't get that far into it. But the show
I'm about
Hats Off.
25% in.
Yeah, you didn't get there. You might have heard he has a show called Hats Off, but he
Yeah,
haven't.
yeah, he mentioned it, and
You'll get
he
you'll get to the
talked about
point
the
where he
process.
yeah, you'll get to the point where
Yeah.
he becomes the host. It's just so
Okay.
stupid. It's just so stupid. It's so stupid. It's funny, and I mean, I'm laughing just thinking about it. Him and the hostess, and this idea of what the show is. I won't tell anybody. Go read it yourself. But it's just, I mean, I'm laughing thinking about it. It's just so stupid, and it just takes game shows to a whole nother. Like, this is what this they can't come up with any ideas. This is what they do, and people take it seriously, and contestants are trying to win money by doing this stupid thing, and it's just funny. So I mean, yeah, that definitely came from there.
Was Pat Sajak? I'm sorry. Was Pat Sajak and Vanna White? What was it like meeting them? Were they like they are on TV, or was it?
She's real. Yeah. So they film 5 shows in a day because there's no reason to bring people. They have the crew there from 9 to 5. They just shoot 5 shows. They have all the contestants sit up in the audience, and then they bring 3 at a time down. Pat and Vanna change their clothes, and it looks like another show. So I was like the last show of the day that was filmed. But beforehand, we're all in the green room waiting. They're giving us instructions. They're hoarding all the contestants into a room. Vanna poked her head in before she went into makeup. Hey, everybody, I'm, Vanna. And we were all like, oh my God, it's Vanna. And she was, she didn't look the same. She had no makeup on. Her hair's pulled back. She's in like sweats. And she's like, just want to wish you all good luck. So glad you're here. It's, have fun. And she was just really sweet like that. And then went off and did her makeup and her dress. But that was really impressed me. And Pat Sajak was cool. But at the end of the show, I won. So I'm standing there with Pat and Vanna on either side. We're talking during the credits. And if you watch the show, they're rolling the credits. And then as soon as they said clear, he just was like, okay, bye. And he just walked away. And I was like, oh, that's kind of like he was just doing it because he was, he's on TV. John, tell me about yourself, and, talking to me. And then, okay, we're done. Okay, see you later. Nice to meet you. Gone. So that was a little bit odd. But, I didn't talk to him one on one except for that. But he was asking me, he knew I lived in Florida. He was asking me because he was thinking of getting a place down here. This is 20 years ago now. Hard to believe. But yeah, I don't know if he bought a place down here or not, but he was asking me about certain areas. So that was the extent of our conversation while the credits were rolling.
Did you have any stage fright going on the show?
No. Well, I will say this. Right before the show started, I'm sitting there going, "Oh my God!" Like I was nervous. But then as soon as the music started, I was totally in my element. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't phased. If you watch the show, which I can tell you how to, it's on YouTube. I put it on YouTube on another
Yeah.
channel. But I watch myself to this day and go, man, that is me. Like that is me being me, whatever that is. That's me being me. Just playing a game, confident, almost arrogant to a degree. I wouldn't say arrogant, but really confident and good at it. And that was it. I mean, that was a great experience. I really enjoyed it.
When did you have the idea to initially start writing just a typo?
All right, so I did the $2 bill documentary, and I was looking for my next project. And Just a Typo was originally an idea for a movie about, and it was going to be a fake documentary. So it was going to be about Mo River Lake, the game show host, and all the people that were being interviewed were all the people in the book talking about, yeah, and then there was the time he did this, and then I would show it. So my idea was to shoot it, and I thought it'd be pretty easy to shoot because all you have to do is hire actors. You don't have to shoot a lot of scenes. You just shoot actors, in an interview.
Yeah.
And I would let people ad lib. And okay, so once I get all the interviews, I can kind of put the film together, and then whatever I'm missing, then I like a scene. Like if I want to see then I have to get a set and do the scene from the game show. I said, so maybe that's a way to do a film, have it be a fake interview, almost like who's the guy that does all the interviews like Best in Show, and you know what I'm talking about? Christopher Guest. You know Chris, right? You know, okay, so he's done a bunch of movies that are like mock documentaries, and I thought I could
Hmm.
do something similar. And then, you know what, writing a script is something I enjoy, but you have to be perfect with it, and you have to condense scene. And I just want, I'm a writer. I just want to go. I just want to
Yeah.
write.
Yeah.
I just want to start on a scene and not even know where it's going and just let it take me somewhere, which you can't really do with a script because then you write yourself into a corner and you got to back up and you got to. So I was like, I don't want to write this as a script. It's going to take too long. I don't want to spend more time thinking about it and outlining it and planning it. I'm just going
Hmm.
to write. I know where this is going and I know where it starts. And I just wrote. The guy, you know, he gets arrested at the beginning, goes back, tells his story, and I hate to say it, but it's true. I knew where it was going, but a lot of it middle I made up as I went along, and I just had fun. And you read it, you go, "There's no way you made this up as you went along," because everything ties in. But what you find is, the more you get into the story, you're making somebody go, "Oh, wait, I can use this thing that happened 20 pages ago. I can use it here," and you put it in, and it works. I could never have thought of that if I'd have planned it in advance because I wouldn't have known what was going to happen on page 30. So I can't plan page 80. But by just writing it, by the time I got to page 80, oh yeah, that thing at page 30 would be great to bring back. Like there's
Hmm.
some secrets in the book that you haven't gotten to yet, I know. And I didn't think of those things until like I wrote that page. You're going to go, there's no way. I mean, I can't tell you. But so anyway, it was a great experience to just sit and write. And again, you would think I planned it all out, but I didn't. But it works out really well. And that part of it's going back and rewriting and adjusting once it's all on, you know, once you get that book down, now it's like clay. Now you mold it. So I enjoyed that experience. I'm trying to write another screenplay now, a TV pilot, but it's hard because I got to plan it. I'm like, I should just write it as a story first and then take the story and then go turn it into a screenplay. And I should take just a typo and turn it into a screenplay. I'm thinking of doing that because I think that would be a good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
It
And
would be.
it's got that base as a book too, your fan
Yeah,
base, I guess.
yeah, and
I
it's
think it
just
would receive a lot of support.
very funny. Yeah. So anyway, that's stuff I'm working on is what to do next.
So do you come up with all the comedic elements as you're writing, or do you go back and place them?
Both. I try to make it as
Both.
funny as I can while I'm writing, and then when I go back, if there's a lull or something I think can be funny, I punch it up. Um, I added a lot of humor in the fourth, fifth draft of the book. A lot of it was in the beginning. Um, yeah, it's total mix, total mix. I mean, listen, my attitude is if you're going to write a humor novel, if you're going to say this is a funny book, people have to laugh almost every page. I don't know if you guys are laughing on every page or not, but I know there are jokes on every page. And I'm glad you said that because I can't imagine reading a humor book and waiting 4 pages for another joke. I mean, yeah, the story has to evolve, but why not write it in a way that you can laugh? So for me, when I did the proofreading, if there was a page with no joke, I was like, I got to figure out something. I got to figure out a way to make this funny. Have the character do something, say something, put something on the shelf, have him fiddling with something. Um, there's a conversation between Mo and Barry later on in the book. I'm sure you haven't gotten there yet, where they're just talking and they're arguing about something. So that's not funny. So I gave Barry, I think, like a fudge bar, and every time he got mad, he went like this, and like part of the fudge bar hit the wall, you know, flew off and hit the wall, and you know, and then he was like going like this with it, and it was on his shirt. So then by the time the end of the scene, he goes to take a lick, and there's nothing there, and well, now you've got a joke that was played out. So now you have this scene where they're arguing about something which isn't funny, but what's happening around it is funny. Maybe funnier than I made it sound, but it makes it works. That's what I'm trying to do is constantly have you giggle or smile.
You do an excellent job at really describing
Hmm.
scenes in the book.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah,
read
and
the end of chapter 4 with the electric
I
socket?
did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Can you go into that
I
story?
told you about that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's a true story.
Could you
yeah.
tell us, or
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
if you want
So
to spoil the
for
book or
those
not?
who don't know, when I was in seventh grade, the teacher was giving a boring lecture, and you know, science rooms have the plugs and the sinks so you could do experiments. So I'm sitting like this at the table, listening to the teacher, and the guy across from me is doing the same thing. He's got staples, and the electric socket is kind of, let me see, it's kind of like right on the desk, they're right in front of you, the desk, if you can see it.
Hmm.
But and he's just putting them. He's not pushing them into the socket. He's just kind of placing them onto the socket because the staples are the exact same width. You know, the prongy parts of the staples can fit perfectly into an electric socket if you line it up. So he had like 4 or 5 of them in there, and he pushed a couple of staples to me and said, you know, you do it on your side. I was like, all right, I'm bored. So I was doing it, and then without thinking of the consequence, I shoved one all the way in with my thumb like this, and literally sparks flew. The whole class was like, "Whoa!" And the teacher was like, "What?" And I singed my thumb. Had to go to the clinic. Had to get cleaned up, and then people were laughing at me. Obviously, it was just stupid. Um, but it's a true story. I stuck a staple in an electric socket, as dumb as that sounds. So in the book, I have the character talk about his upbringing and the time that he earned this nickname, and people made fun of him. He did the same. I just, just call easiest scene to write. Just write what happened, fictionalize it a little bit, change the name, but you describe the scene. You have to do a lot, but it's funny, so use it. I mean, some of the best stuff I know from other novels, some of the funniest things you read and see in movies
Mhm.
are true stories. People don't
Mhm.
make that stuff up. They're true stories.
Do you still have the singe on your thumb?
Yeah, I think it's still there. I can't really see it, but if I look close enough, it's a slightly discolored. It's just a thin line. It's probably
Hmm.
gone away, but I don't remember which
Hmm.
thumb it was. I think it was my right because I'm right-handed, but I was sitting like this, so it might have been my left. So I don't know, and I can't find it. So maybe it is gone.
Yeah, there's one scene in the book I just found it very amusing for whatever reason where our main character, how do you say his name?
Well, his real name is
His real name, not his
Moro,
surname.
Moro
Moro.
Basilio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know how to say his first name. Moro. When Moro is getting tipped for letting his customers kind of take the silverware when
Oh,
he's working as a
in the
waiter.
right in Murray's Deli. Yeah, so I
Yes,
actually
in the
worked in
deli.
a Jewish deli
Okay.
when I was 15 years old. It wasn't an Oriental slash Jewish deli. I made it that because what I'm trying to do in the book, because he offends everybody with this tweet, with the story of those who don't know is about a guy that's a game show host sends out a tweet with a typo in it, and it turns it really offensive. Firestorm of negativity. And then as we go back and learn about his past, everything he's ever done gets twisted into this narrative that suddenly made him offensive. So as I'm writing his story about growing up, I had to put everything that happened that could lay you. When you guys get to the end of the book, you'll see it all comes back. Everything that happened in his life is now interpreted as being offensive. So I said, and when he goes to get a job at age 15, it's got to be someplace where later on people can look back and say, oh, that was offensive, even though it wasn't. So I put him in this hybrid Jewish, kosher Oriental place. Kosher Oriental is how I described it, right? Murray. So I didn't work in a place like that, but I did work at a place called Murray's, and the character, the owner Murray, is I wrote based on real life. And there
Mhm.
was a Buddha statue in there, for even though it was a Jewish deli. There was just so. So that stuff is there's a lot of it is kind of true. Stealing the sugar, stealing the utensils. Those are people that I was a busboy that saw, and again pulling from you don't I didn't write it down at the time, but I remember. And you just always pull from true experiences to try to come up with funny ideas.
Now, is Moro meant to be Jewish? Because I recognize a
No, he's
lot of
not
Jewish
Jewish.
vocabulary.
He's not Jewish.
Hmm.
Okay.
He's Italian.
Because
Moro
he's
Basilio.
Italian.
Italian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
In fact, Moro is my middle name.
Okay.
My middle name is
Hmm.
Moro, which is short for Mauricio, which was my grandfather's name. But even
Okay.
my wife makes fun of me, not real fun of me, but teasing, playful, flirtatious fun of me for my middle name being Moro because it sounds like moron, and that's why I
Yeah.
put it in the book. So again, it was easy to call on experiences of a middle name that's as odd as Moro, and put them in the book. So I gave that as the guy's first name, and it was easy to shorten that to Mo. I think the idea for Mo River Lake came first, and then I expanded Mo to Moro. Oh, that's perfect, I said, because that's my middle name.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just evolves.
Yeah. Okay.
You mentioned that you were a fan of other comedy books. Have you ever read any Carl Hyacin?
I know who he is. I don't read a lot of his books. I've read Dave Barry. Dave Barry used to be a Sunday columnist down here for the Miami Herald, and he's written a few books which are silly and crazy and outrageously fun. And then there's a gentleman who wrote, Frederick Backman, wrote a couple of books. A Man Called Otto, which was in the theaters. That was originally called A Man Called Uwe. He's got one called Anxious People, which was good. There's an author called Stephen Wilson who wrote a couple of humor books. So I like reading stuff like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think you would like Carl Hyacin. All of his stories center around Southern Florida. So he takes his inspiration a lot of times from actual events in Southern Florida, um, like lots of Medicare fraud and stuff like that. He turns into comedy stories. But that was really my first introduction to comedy writing. It kind of got me into it. But
I mean, I tell you, I like to write movies and TV, but there's something about writing humor fiction like I did, where again, where you could just go, I could sit down like right now and just you could tell me 3 words and say, all right, go write a story about an earthquake and an elevator and salmon. I just made those
Mhm.
three. And all right, so now I need a story where someone's eating salmon, they're in an earthquake while in an elevator, and I could just go. I could write something that would inevitably be funny.
Mhm.
Um, now, could I build it into a full story? I mean, we'll see, like a book, but I could definitely write a short story on that. Um, but yeah, it's just enjoyable. I just it's harder to break in as a book writer than as a screenwriter because nowadays, if you have a really good screenplay, you can get it picked up and get it turned into a TV show, and then you can do multiple episodes.
Yeah.
Books are hard, man. You got to self-publish them. You got to get them marketed. You got, until I get discovered really more than I am now, it's hard.
Can you talk about the difference between marketing the book and marketing your $2 bill documentary? Because you mentioned earlier that you went to multiple film festivals. Did you do any book signings with the
No,
just a
because
typo?
it's when you self-publish, I would love to have done it, but the question is who's going to host you? You're not a known author. I'm probably
Yeah.
known more for the $2 bill. I should probably sign that book, but it's like I have to make enough of a name for myself to get people to want me to be there and know that a crowd's going to come and buy the book. So it's hard to do that. Through social media, you can do book signing giveaways. You could say, "Here's my sign," but and just try to. And I haven't done as much of that as I can because I'm not really a marketer. I'm a creative. I wish I was more of a marketer. I know what I kind of want to do, but it's hard to formulate a plan. So I write these books. I did some initial marketing. My book was a bestseller for the first 2 weeks, and then it goes down and doesn't really come back up. It just kind of stays here. It just has a few little waivers. I don't know much about marketing. If anybody's watching does and wants to help me market a book, you're in for a cut. Reach out, help me out. But the $2 bill kind of markets itself. I don't know how I got 24,000 followers. I put a video up, the guy that got arrested using them at Best Buy. I took the clip out of the movie and put that up, and it's got 2 million views. I did a video that I didn't use in the film, where I drove around to fast food places and tried to use $2 bills at Wendy's and Burger King, and I ended up not using the footage in the film. It just was too corny, but it worked for YouTube, and it's got 2 million views, and a lot of people comment on it, and that made me a few $1,000s in ad revenue. So and then, of course, YouTube, the algorithm kicks in and they start showing the content to more people. So there's no marketing that you have to do as long as you can have a couple of videos that hit. And I was lucky enough to have a couple of videos that hit.
And it's really interesting how people really are interested in it because me and Ethan did a previous episode on the actual book and documentary.
Yeah.
And I said, Ethan, I thought it was really interesting. I loved the book and the documentary. I said, Ethan, I don't know if we'll have that much conversation to talk about it.
And then we
And
talked
we
about
ended
it
up
for
talking about it for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So it just,
Oh, has
it's,
it's
much,
been an hour? It's been an hour, yeah.
Yeah.
it's amazing how much content we could actually talk about and just keep the ball rolling. Just me and Ethan talking back and forth with each other
Yeah.
about the $2 bill.
Yeah.
I should have asked you earlier. You talked about going to film festivals. What was promoting the film at different film festivals like? And I've
Well,
never been to one. How
there's
does it work?
a process as a filmmaker where you got to do some research. Look, there's zillions of festivals out there. Finding the ones that are right for you, that have, sometimes there's science fiction film, but obviously don't submit your movie there. Trying to find a fit, and then you submit the film. Usually you have to pay an application fee, like $40, and then you wait for them to say yes or no. And there were some that I really wanted to get into, I didn't get into. There were some I was like, I don't care if I get into this or not, and I got in. And then there were a couple local ones, Palm Beach Film Festival, which is a big one, which I got in, Fort Lauderdale, which I got in. So it's not like you pick which ones you want to be in. You pick which ones you want to submit to, and you hope you get accepted. And then if you get accepted, they find a time to schedule it. Sometimes you go to one and you're stuck at 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon screening, and there's 14 people there. And then sometimes you get into one where you're Friday night at 6 o'clock and you have a full house. Or it's a 400 seat theater and you got 200 people, so it feels like it's half empty. Or I did one where it was a 75 seat theater in San Francisco, and there were like 85 people in the theater standing in the back, and so you feel like it's, oh my god, we have this huge crowd, half as many people as the Palm Beach Festival, but it feels bigger because it's packed into a smaller theater. So it's just it's every city's different. They introduce you, you feel like a celebrity. Ultimately, though, it's not about ego. It's just you're thrilled that people can watch what you made. I think if you get any other creative on future shows you do, they're going to tell you the same thing. I wrote a book. I would love for you to read it and laugh. I made a
Yeah.
film. I'd love for you to watch it and smile and come out of there saying, I loved it and I learned something. That is more important to me than how much money it makes. The only reason you hope it makes money is because, and anybody will tell you this, you hope it's successful and makes money because then it allows you to do more. I
Yeah.
have a job, I have a wife and a kid, and I have to pay bills and insurance, and I have to go to work every day. I'm not making enough money selling the book and making YouTube revenue to just work for myself. I'm working toward that, but until that time, you got to keep going to work. I wish somebody, I wish I could sell 1 million copies of the book tomorrow and
Mhm.
put that money in a bank and just stay home and write my next one and pay for the cover and pay to self-publish it and pay for some marketing and the next, and that book does another million copies, so it's all I kind of lost my train of thought, but that's the process. The film, just I want people to see it, and
Yeah.
film festivals allow you to have people from all over the country see it, and they get a chance to meet you. There's a Q&A after, so you're interacting with your audience, so it's a great experience.
Do you have any tips on improving that creative process? Maybe your writing or filming,
Just
just
keep doing it.
practice.
Just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I've gone through lulls where I'm not working on something creative, and it's harder to get back. I started writing a second book, and I don't think I had the idea as firm as I wanted, and I started writing, and it just was just spiraling to nowhere. And I realized I didn't have my mojo yet. Like I
Mhm.
needed to keep going, needed to figure it out, and then I would have. For that one, I was ended up saying, let me shelve this one for a while and work on something else. But you just got to keep doing it. That's all I can just keep doing it. You'll get better at it. My book,
Yeah.
my it's a typo. I won't say it sucked, but it wasn't that good the first draft. It had a lot of stuff in it that's the same, that's funny, but on the whole, it was missing some character stuff, and my editor told me some things to fix it to make the character, the relationship with him and his brother wasn't a part of this original story. There's a lot of things in there that were missing, and so yeah, it was kind of a garbage first draft. I'm embarrassed that I let my mom read it because it was nowhere near as good. But the point is, keep working on it, keep working on it, keep working on
Yeah.
it. And I believe that every project has X number of hours before it's good, and it's just how long will it take you to do X? I don't know what X is, but if it's 400 hours, at some point when you've got to that 400th hour, it'll be good.
Yeah.
So it's just you got to keep working on it.
And I should mention this earlier. You said twos were very important in your life, and you talk about different, how twos have, come up in your story pretty often. Can you talk about that? Is it your lucky number, the number two, or?
No, it's not. I said that twos were important in my life. Let me see. Well, I have these $2 bills in my drawer, and they've always been fascinating to me. So that's part of it. A lot of my usernames now have twos in them. Um, I think I mentioned this at the film that two is kind of a universal number, right? You get married, there's two of you. Left, right, hot, cold, everything's in twos and pairs. We're
Binary.
symmetrical. We have two ears. Yeah, binary was the word, right? And so I think kind of hearing that when because I didn't come up with that. Those are people I interviewed that came up with that. In fact, the gentleman named Eric Mintz, who's in the film, he's the one who gives that soundbite. So I think doing a film about that piece of currency was opened my eyes to a lot of things about the number two, and consequently using $2 bills and I say, hey, you're the $2 bill guy, and that number just keeps coming up. So I don't think it was part of me before, but it's definitely part of me now.
Mm. And to go in more into the actual writing of a novel, what's your writing habits? Is there any time of day that you are more productive?
Yeah,
Like in the
yeah.
morning or
So
evening?
I was working. I didn't have a full-time job at the time. I was just working for myself. So I only worked when I had stuff to do. And my wife went to work, and my son went to school. And I just have a hard time writing when there's people in the house. I don't know why, but maybe you guys, I don't know, have a hard time doing homework when people are home. But just sitting here, the dog comes in, the son and wife wants something. So they would go to work every day, and then by 9 o'clock, I just sat at my kitchen table or something and just wrote. And I knew I had till about 3 o'clock when I picked my son up from school that this is when I got to get this done. Because then as soon as they came home, it was too distracting. So that was my thing, was working on whenever nobody was home, which was good because whenever nobody was home, I literally like I couldn't wait to do it. I went right to do it, and sometimes I did it while they were here. Did some revisions while they were here. That wasn't a problem. But coming up with stuff, sometimes I got to get up and just pace the house and talk to myself, which I
Mm-hmm.
did many times. and you can't have somebody here to do that because you can't talk to yourself when people are home. So that's kind of it, mornings and when nobody's home.
I kind of like to touch more into the comedy side of it too. I'm a big fan of comedy. I love stand up, like Rodney Carrington, Ron White, all these different guys. What were the comedic influences for you, like growing up? Were you a big fan of stand up or
Yeah,
comedy?
well, it's funny. I mean, this is Sebastian Maniscalco. Obviously, doesn't go back that far, so I can't use him as an influence. But he's actually coming to Florida. Just bought tickets to see him um, in a couple of weeks. He's coming in July. He'll be here. He's real funny. But growing up, I mean, Eddie Murphy did that. His Delirious, Ronnie Dangerfield, Jerry Seinfeld. I actually remember seeing him on a Young Comedians show before he did a TV show. He did a bit about Superman and how Clark Kent has glasses and like what a great disguise. Like he didn't even have lenses in him, and he was like, this thing, man, Lois, that's right through the glasses. I remember some of the bits Jerry Seinfeld as a young comedian did. So people like that, Richard Pryor, although he was a little dirty, but a lot of the young comedians who are now old comedians are influences. Sometimes it's just stand up people that you forget. They were on HBO. You used to have a young comedy show, and there would just be any comedian on there. So I mean, we grew up with who's the guy? Sam Kinison. Do you know who Sam Kinison is? No,
Mm-mm.
he's the guy that yelled all the time. He'd be like, "Yeah, my girlfriend wanted me to do this." I said, "No, no." He'd scream. His whole thing was screaming. And he ended up in a Rodney Dangerfield movie called Back to School, playing a teacher who
Yeah.
screams at his kids. You probably know the one I'm talking about. Say
I
it,
do.
say it. That's Sam Kinison.
Yeah.
So those kind of guys, they all had routines. Gallagher, who used to smash the watermelons,
Yeah.
if you know. So people like that.
As we're wrapping up, we have a few questions that we ask every interviewee. And first one is, do you have any advice for people looking into getting into film writing or playwriting, or becoming an author, stuff like that?
Yeah, well, first is, it's not like when I was a kid where you had to go to class. You can learn online. I mean, first of all, you're going to learn by doing, but if you want to learn structure, you want to learn, formatting, details, intricacies to make the creative part fit more naturally into a format, go online and learn. Take a course. There's so many courses. Watch a podcast on it. There's so much you can learn. You don't need to go to college anymore. I would say that, but you don't really need to go to college. You can learn what you want online if you know what you're looking for and you're dedicated. But then just keep writing, and then be okay with it sucking at first. My problem is I want everything to be good right out of the chute, and I know that's impossible. But I hate writing garbage, knowing it's garbage, even though I know I'm going to take that garbage and mold it into something better. It's so hard to spit it out, knowing that, oh man, this sucks. I got to keep the scene. It's not going anywhere, but I just got to get to the end of it so that I can fix it. But you got to be able to persevere, not let it get you down, and not let it give you a reason to quit.
Mm-hmm. And our next question is kind of in the same vein as that previous question. What is your advice to young adults just making their way in the world? They're just getting out of high school. They don't really know what they want to do. They're kind of lost. What's your advice for
That's
them?
hard because I'm not living in that world anymore. But you guys have so many more opportunities than I did. I mean, I give you guys all the credit in the world. You guys are doing a podcast. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, how many kids your age are doing that? So I would almost turn the question around and say, how did you guys start this? What made you decide to do it? You had the idea, and then
Yes,
you
sir.
said, and you actually went and did it instead of saying, it's
Yeah.
too much, because you probably had a zillion reasons to not do it.
We did.
Yeah.
We've always been a big fan of podcasts and interviews. And we're a big fan of Lex Fridman. I don't know if you know who that is. But he interviews a lot of scientists, a lot of experts in the field. And we've always wanted to do a podcast, but we said we kind of put it off. It's too hard. We don't have the equipment. We don't know how to get it out there. And finally, we just said one day on the bus to a school conference, actually a business conference, we said, let's just do it.
Yeah.
And we came up with a name that day and an idea.
Yeah.
And
by
next week, we had a website, and our first episode was out.
That's it. So that's the advice that you give to people that are young. Come up with an idea, give it a shot. If you guys may fail, I don't know, but if you do, God bless you. Tried it, you figured it out, what's wrong, and maybe you come back in a year and decide to try it again with a different format, and you learn from this. I think there's all sorts of inspirational quotes out there that failure is the first step to success. Now, I'm not saying you guys are going to fail. I hope you don't. But the point is that whatever you're doing right now will help you on whatever you're going to end up doing down the road. And if you actually make this a success, it might not be for a couple of years, but these episodes right here will help you in the future.
Yeah.
I mean, I can already, again, I'm not going to you guys are doing great. There's a couple things I would say, knowing how to host a little bit, that I would give you
Mhm.
tips on to make you better.
Mhm.
And I can
Mhm.
tell you that
Okay.
another
Yeah.
time. You're not doing bad at all, but there are some things I think you'll learn, and you'll see my point,
Yeah.
and you'll realize.
Mhm.
But you're doing it, man. You're out there doing it, and
Yeah.
you're only going to get better, and hopefully attract more guests. And then I tell my wife, I said, I do podcasts like these because you guys, I don't know where you guys are going to, you do shows for years. You'll have me back multiple times. I've got other podcasts that have me back
Absolutely.
as a regular guest. So I say
Yeah.
yes, and I do it, and I'm grateful, and I commend you guys.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for giving us your
But yeah,
time.
the learning aspect of it, something that's
Very
invaluable.
difficult. Yeah, and especially
And
with
it's very valuable.
I handle all the audio stuff, and that can be a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, no, I learned because one of my first jobs in Hollywood was for a documentary show, which is how I learned the format. And I had to go out and
Mhm.
ask people questions. We did little segments at a facility, and I had to ask questions. And my fault, which I think again, it's not really a fault. I had like a list of questions I wanted to get answered, and so I would read the question and get their answer, and then I would read the next question and get their answer. And I had
Mhm.
some older guy in Santa Monica Boulevard one day just tell me, don't read off the questions like a checklist. He goes, have a conversation.
Mhm.
So I've learned, it's taken a while, but my only, again, I don't mind criticizing you guys at all, but you guys have your questions, which is great. You're prepared. But I would say what you do moving forward is listen to what the person says. And then instead of going right to the next question, talk about it more, or just ask a question that either comes to mind, or share your own experience. Or so don't make it like, let's just make sure we knock off all the questions on the list, which is fine. I think this went really well. But I think moving forward, and again, you could cut this part out if you want,
No, no,
Yeah, you're
no.
fine.
but I would say that's what, and you'll learn too, and you'll say, you know what, he was right, because you'll figure it out the same way. It took me a while to figure it out. Have a conversation with the person, have some questions ready, because you don't want dead air. If it's going nowhere, have a question. But if I say something that appeals to you about Wheel of Fortune, and you have your own thought, go with it. Even
Mhm.
if, and you might not get to
Yeah.
7 of your questions, or
Yeah.
10 of your questions, just roll with the topic and keep going, because it's, when you do it the way you guys do it, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, as opposed to a flow. So I guess I don't mind telling you on the air, but again, you'll get there. You figure that out, and if you take that advice, you'll see the difference. It'll just
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
elevate
And
it
I think
for you.
I think the format has something to do with it because we've never did a virtual
Yeah.
Yeah,
interview before.
this is the first one.
So yeah,
Yes.
it is the
Yeah,
first one.
So
And
our chemistry in person is a little bit different too.
yeah.
I'm
Um,
sure. Yeah, and again, I'm not criticizing you guys at all. Just,
no,
I
no,
can
you're
No,
help
no,
good.
you. I
no.
can help you on the air,
We'll
or
take any advice
I
that
can
we can
tell you
get at this
later, or
point.
I can tell you now.
Well,
It's
tell us now would be
Now it's
great.
fun.
Yeah.
totally. I mean, I did it, and I remember what I felt like when the guy told me, because this guy, I don't know who he was, but he just said, he goes like, don't shoot them out like a shotgun questions. Just talk to me. And I was like, oh, because I was like, read the question, get the answer. Read the question, get the answer. And you're not doing that as bad as I was, but now I sit down and talk to like that woman about the $2 bills whose husband died, and it was such a natural conversation, and you'd be surprised what you'll get back when you do it that way, because then they don't just answer the question, they go deeper. So worth it a shot. Yeah.
And that was one of the goals starting our
Initially,
podcast,
yeah,
is learning how to talk to people we've really never met before,
and have a
or
conversation.
people with totally different backgrounds
Hmm.
than where we come from, and being able to have a constructive conversation with that
Mhm.
person and learn more about them, really.
Yeah.
So that was one of our original, you know.
And your audience will appreciate it, because they'll want to know about your guests too. So if
Yeah.
you guys take an interest in asking a couple of questions, I mean, I have no problem speaking, as you can tell, but let them speak, and then just give them another prompt. That's not always a question, to have them go deeper. That's the way to do it. So where you go? Is it you in your front yard? Where are you guys?
No, we're
Uh,
at the local
yeah.
library, so
We don't have broadband infrastructure where we live,
very
so
rural. So
we're at the library, which is one of the only places in the county with stable internet connection. So
Okay. All right. Good. It's all
yeah,
good. And you got to notice, I think it's funny, you each have an AirPod on either side.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Sharing
We're
everything.
making do with what
Wonderful.
we have.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
good. Hey, look, like I said, if I had what you have now at age 16, I don't know what I would have done. I mean, I probably would have taken a lot more initiative. I don't know, but I mean, it's like I'm envious that I didn't have, like I'm sitting right behind my screen as my editing program, which I was working on before I came on. The fact that I
Mhm.
can shoot stuff and edit stuff here at my desk, I couldn't do that when I was a kid. I had to shoot film, wait for
Yeah.
it to get developed, use a little moviola, get a projector out to show it. I mean, it was like, now you just click. I mean, it's I wish I had this stuff when I was a kid.
And our last question.
It's a bit of a doozy. We ask every interviewee because we always get very unique
answers.
responses to it.
But what is the meaning of life to you?
Oh God. And I think about it, meaning of life.
Yeah.
To you.
I don't know that I've solved that one yet. I think people feel like they need to have an answer, and so they come up with an answer. It's kind of my take on religion too. I think, and I'm not going to get into religion, but people I think need religion for certain. And I'm not religious. I'm not overly religious either. I won't get into it. But I think that the purpose of life. Oof. I mean, when you think about the fact that there's so many different species and creatures, and every one of them is a life, just because we have a more advanced brain and can do more things than a fish doesn't mean there's any difference in life. It's just what we're capable of. So, why does a fish exist? Why did dinosaurs exist? Why is there a frog out there? I mean, however this world was created, we have living organisms that come to fruition, and what we do with it is up to us. You only have so much time here, so try to enjoy yourself. Try not to put yourself through stress. Try to laugh as much as possible. Like, why wouldn't you enjoy every moment that you possibly can? I think people that live their lives stressed out and worried about stuff are just, again, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I don't know if there is a purpose except you're here and you've only got so much time. And can you leave an imprint for future people that make their lives better or more entertained? Which is, I'm not going to make the world better. I just might make it funnier. Can you leave any sort of a legacy that future people can enjoy for their short time on Earth? I'm going to try to do that for my short time on Earth. How's that?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And as we're wrapping up here, is there anything that you would like to plug? Any projects in the future coming up?
No, I mean, listen, I appreciate being on. If people want to laugh, I'd love for you to read the book. I'm sure they'll enjoy it. It's called Just a Typo. It's on Amazon. If you're interested in $2 bill, if you're interested in what I've talked about, you're probably going there anyway. Go check out $2billmovie.com with the number 2, or the $2 bill documentary, TWO, on YouTube. Watch some videos, learn something, watch the film, buy the book. I'm not going to sit here and plug stuff for you to buy stuff. Like I said before, if you want to laugh and read a funny book, go get my book, and I'll appreciate the sale. And if you watch my videos on YouTube, some ad revenue, and I'll appreciate that. And hopefully you hit the like button and share a comment about how much you enjoyed it. And that makes me happy.
I'll be sure to put some links to your stuff in our podcast description.
Just enjoy what I put out there. It's the best reward I can get.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Bernardo, thank you for coming on today. It's been an honor to talk to you.
Yeah, I think you guys have really enjoyed. Good luck to you guys with this podcast. I'm going to keep track of you guys now, see how you're doing, and I'll come back on next year when you're overbooked. You can squeeze me in.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.